If you're navigating a job search or career pivot, there's a new resource you must know about. Wanted, a board career by executive coach Marlo Lyons, reveals how board service can strengthen your leadership brand and open doors your resume never will. It's a practical, step-by-step guide for professionals ready to think differently about what's next. The book is available now. Check the show notes to learn more.
It doesn't matter if you're in HR, like where I came from, or if you're in IT or customer service or marketing. It's going around and learning and finding mentors in other parts of the business so that you can understand how they all come together and how it all works and functions. And that makes it easier to sit and act like a CEO, right?
I want to start today with a question for you. When you think about your career right now, are you just doing your job or are you actively shaping it? Because there's a big difference between the two. Today's conversation is about how to make the shift toward thinking differently about the role you play inside your organization and the value you create. My guest today is Casey Webster. She's an HR executive and gamification expert, and she brings a practical perspective on how to step into that next level of ownership in your career. We talk about how to think more broadly about your work, how to build visibility across teams, and how to take ownership of your development, because I can promise you, your company won't be as invested as you are. So if you've been wondering what it actually takes to advance your career in today's environment, stay with us. Let's get unscripted. Casey, welcome to Work Unscripted.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am so excited to talk to you because I honestly think that too many people are just doing their day jobs and it's not enough today. It's not enough. We're seeing all the layoffs again and the non-hiring. So as a coach, I'm always helping people trying to level up, and I know you're doing the same. So one of the big questions that I think people need to think about, or one of the things they need to think about their career, is how to act, how to be like a CEO, how to think like a CEO. And I know you teach employees at all levels how to look through that lens and shape their work. So what do you tell them?
Yeah, what a great question. And I always tell the story when I graduated college and I got a business degree. I didn't get a HR degree. And my mom said to me, go out and be a strong business leader that's running HR. And I didn't quite know what that meant until I got into the workforce. And that's the advice that I'm telling people all the time. It's how do I become a business leader that's working in whatever function it is that I work in? You know, I think about going back to my leadership training days, and they would talk to us about owning the business, acting like we are one of the owners of the business, looking through that lens of if this was my money in my checkbook, what kind of decisions would I be making? If this was my legacy of my name on the outside of this building, how would I want the employees to be treated? And it doesn't matter if you're in HR, like where I came from, or if you're in IT or customer service or marketing. It's going around and learning and finding mentors in other parts of the business so that you can understand how they all come together and how it all works and functions. And that makes it easier to sit and act like a CEO, right? Because that CEO is making decisions from this high level overview of the whole company. You know, what one change might be good for one department might not be great for another. And so by getting that experience outside of just your home department, it helps you wear that lens of a CEO.
I love when you said thinking about all parts of the business. People don't realize like they're in this little silo in their little job, and they don't realize that you make a process change, you make a people change even, and how it can impact a cross stream, upstream, downstream. People don't think outside their little bubble like, oh, I'm making this change in my group. That's so critical for today when it does impact outward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the biggest leadership type of training I go in and work with clients on is breaking down silos and understanding at the end of the day, everyone wants to do a good job. We're all good people, but our priorities might be different. Our expectations may be different. what our manager is asking us to get done may be different. I recently did a game for a client, and they make like exhibitor booths. So when you go to any kind of conference and you're walking through, and so they're every time they get a new project, it's brand new. Nothing, no two exhibit booths look a lot alike. And so we put together a collaboration game where we had to take scenarios through sales and design, graphics, production, installation. And while they were making decisions and they could listen to each other make decisions, they had to keep their client satisfaction meter going up and they couldn't lose their employee morale tokens. And what it did and what I loved as we did this game was watching just those aha moments of, okay, I understand how living in a sales world and having to rely on commissions to feed my family, why sometimes that probably does cross their mind. Or, wow, we crap on manufacturing a lot to fix things and to win it in the end, right? Like we finished the finish line. And so having those different experiences and doing it in a training game way, they were all able to gain empathy for each other. That we're all trying to do what's right for the customer and the employees, and it's not easy.
No, it's not. And I think that the more you can think globally, you can think enterprise, even if you're in the lowest level position, like that will help you be visible, have an impact, have a bigger impact. And it'll also help you grow quicker, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what made me successful. That's what I was at the executive C level by the time I was 30 years old. And that is exactly how I did it. And there was even a point where I moved my desk physically out of HR and moved it in with the operations team. So I was with the plant controller and the engineering manager because I wanted to be a part of the business and not just this support system outside. And I was able to hear a bunch of different conversations, none that applied to HR, but applied to business and how it all pieced together. And it made me so much stronger when I went in front of people because I could talk about the business and how I could apply people skills and our resources to make things happen.
You use a 4-question framework that people should ask themselves every day in their jobs, whether they're in HR or in the business. What are those 4 questions?
Absolutely. So we all, no matter what job you're in sales. You have to sell yourself every day. You have to sell your work. And I saw the greatest TikTok video yesterday, and I wish I would have grabbed his name. But he was talking about like 2 employees. They might do the exact same work, the exact same project, but one that checks the box and says, I'm done, and they move on to the next, versus the second person who story tells and goes and sells what kind of work they did, what kind of impact they did. That second person is going to have more career progression than the person that is doing the exact same hard work because they're not selling that work to the organization. So those 4 questions that I encourage people to ask as they get through projects, as they're taking on more assignments is one, and we're gonna be, this is gonna sound very similar to a sales funnel. So at the top of your funnel, you have awareness, right? So how am I creating awareness of the value I'm bringing to the organization? What are the things I'm telling my boss?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah,
when you talk about awareness?
Am I talking to people? Am I telling them what I'm working on? Now, I'm not saying like sometimes there's confidential things that we're working on, but in general, we can talk about it. Hey, we hit another milestone in the project. We're in the testing phase of it. You run into maybe the next level up leader in the canteen or lunch area, and you say, hey, that project's going really well. Thanks for your support. It's going to have major impact on it. Just these little touch points.
Gosh, that's stakeholder management at its finest, right? That's what people forget. Like you're given a project, you believe that project, I've got it. I've got that project. But if you don't do those checkpoints, those leaders don't actually know that you got it, even though you've never, ever not delivered before.
Right.
But you have to do those checkpoints, and people forget to do those checkpoints, but those are the times where you get to say, look at me, I got it. I really got it. So, and hey, it's going great, or here's where I need you to, clear roadblocks, or here are some areas I'd love your opinion on. Like, this is your time to engage and get that visibility that you're losing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So create awareness. That's number one. And that's huge, huge. What's number two?
Number two, so think about engagement and really that conversion to make people raving fans of yours. So the question is, how am I turning that awareness into real impact and partnerships? So this is where I now have the trust of that executive on that project that when I go to say, hey, here's the roadblocks, they're listening to me because they trust me. I've kept them informed. I've built a relationship with them, and they're going to help me move my project forward, my initiative forward, or maybe they're going to say, no, we need to go a different direction, and they're going to feel comfortable with me of giving me that feedback. So how do we, now that I've got them aware of what we're going, how do I now really engage them a little bit deeper?
Okay. Engagement sounds like a sales funnel to me. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. So engaging them, making sure they trust you, making sure that they know that you've got it, right? They know you've got it, and they trust that you've got it, and that you're engaging them at the right points. Got it.
We're following through on our commitments. We're meeting deadlines. They're seeing the performance. They're seeing those promises happen.
Okay. Got it. Now, number three.
Three is retention and loyalty. So the question is, how am I continuing to grow and stay engaged so my work stays valuable? So we hear a lot about burnout, right?
We do.
And this is going to be probably an unpopular opinion, but I would never use that word in the workplace.
Ooh, you mean not say that I'm burned out?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't either, quite frankly, because it shows you don't know boundaries, and you don't know how to set your own boundaries, and you don't know how to ask for help, and you don't know how to take care of yourself in the process of the job. Am I right? Am I somewhere close to that?
Yes, absolutely. And you get lumped into that group of people, right? Like they stereotype you into that group of, oh, yep, they're one of those burnout. They can't handle the job. They're a Gen Z. They're a millennial. Right? And you wear that tagline that us as a generation, us as whatever that stereotype group is trying to like break through and say like, hey, that's not all of us, right? When we all get lumped into this, like we want to work, we want to do good, we want to climb the ladder, but we want to be treated fair, whatever those things are. So it's really about how do we keep that loyalty. So when there are cuts, there's no way they're cutting me. They're loyal to me. They want to retain me. I bring good value to the organization.
So it's constantly showing your value and showing it to multiple people, not just your org, but to the cross-functional leaders who are also potentially doing cuts. So they know, hey, Marlo, I need Marlo. Like, we're not losing Marlo, right? Absolutely. Or we're not losing Casey. Like, we've got to keep this person from multiple perspectives, right?
Right. And the other piece I would add to this section is, and one of my biggest career mistakes was I expected the company to develop me. I spent all this money in college. I'm not spending any more money. I'm not paying for myself to go to conferences. I'm not paying to take this training course. My company needs to pay for that.
I'm not paying for an executive coach. I'm not paying for a career coach. I'm not paying for any of that because I expect my company to do it, and they don't.
They don't. So I'm putting my personal growth and development and my potential of what I can make in some manager's lap or some company's lap. I mean, there are some companies that probably are the exception to that, but that's my career. That's my livelihood. And I should have invested financially in myself throughout it. On top of what and I'm not saying the company didn't invest in me, but on top of it, I should have been doing more.
Yeah, companies provide learning management systems. They have videos for you to watch. Sometimes you can go to like an HBDI or a DISC or, any of those types of analysis of who you are and how you work best and all that stuff. But that's not true development. That's not real time. I'm having a conversation with my boss this week on something. How do I position this in a way that helps me look good in this really tough conversation? That you won't get. You will not get that.
Right.
And that's the growth and development, because then next time you know how to have that next conversation, or how do I give this employee feedback when this employee cries in front of me every single time? How do I not have judgment on that crying, right? How am I thinking about things and what are my limiting beliefs? This is such a huge, huge, important piece of your career growth is understanding that it's on you.
And this isn't like technical skills. The companies jump really fast. If I need to get better training on compliance or SolidWorks, if I'm an engineer, but at that individual contributor level, they don't put much investment in teaching conflict, teaching communication skills, teaching resistance, teaching buy-in, teaching executive presence. And no matter what role you're in, you need all those things. Like I've almost got to the point lately where I've been like, we have all these tech schools for high schools, and I'm like, maybe we should flip these out and we'll teach the tech in the workplace, and we need our high schools to be developing communication skills, because no matter what job, all these kids need it, right?
Absolutely.
It's just a gap. And we expect our employers to do it, and they're trying to catch up with their managers that they promoted that they never developed. Right?
Exactly.
And also
just teaching a conversation of boundaries of, hey, how to have that conversation without being like, no, or stay out of my way, or, not being aggressive about it, and having that conversation in a healthy way so that those boundaries will be honored, so that your values will be honored, because that's why people are so miserable, is that every day they're watching their values be, either not honored or at worst violated. Right. And then they just are so unfulfilled and so unhappy and so, quote, burnt out that you're not supposed to stay in the workplace. And I just think that you're right. If we taught this earlier, if we taught this when people entered each company, right? Mm-hmm. If it was a first thing to teach. Yeah. So we hit all four, right?
Yep, we're on advocacy. We're on number 4.
Oh, there's one more advocacy. Okay. So go ahead on advocacy.
Which is, how am I building relationships and becoming an advocate for others and for the organization? So this, again, it's around celebrating your peers when they're doing good. That's leadership. That's showing that you don't have to take credit for everything. It's about sharing your knowledge, not being afraid that somebody else is going to take my job or AI is going to take my job. To be open and work together as a team to figure out, how do we make things more efficient? Or if you're working on a new design, what's the best way to create this new product? And so it's about really being that voice and communicating and being open. And, one of the things we do at the executive level in HR is we run succession planning sessions. And you'll have that whole executive team in there. And when they bring up your name, you want that whole executive team being advocates for you, saying, yeah, I want her on my project team. Yeah, I want her to support my business unit. You want them fighting over you and being your advocates.
You absolutely do, because it matters. And that's what I was talking about, that cross-functional piece. It's not just your boss. You want multiple people in that room fighting for you each time.
And a great example from my career on this is, I had built a strong relationship with our operations team for one of our plant, and that director of operations is the one that went to fight for my pay increase. HR was notorious for getting 3% increases, and he would not back down with the CHRO, that he did not want to lose me, that I was his business partner, that I was different. I got a $20,000 increase because
I just coached someone on this. I just coached somebody on this, Casey. Just did, on, how do you leverage your cross-functional leaders to advocate for you for, the promotion? Because it's not your boss that gives you the promotion. It's everybody around them that helps support that promotion.
Absolutely. Because that CEO is going to go ask that manager's peers and say, hey, are they easy to work with? Are they bringing value to your department? And it's not, you're exactly right. It is, that manager just gets to make a recommendation.
That's right. So how can employees use this framework and shape their growth?
Yeah. So I think every time that you take on that new project, uh, you start to sit in that CEO seat. If I own this company, what would I want to be communicated to? What parts of these projects? What like snippets should I be giving out? Um, what is it that, who should I go learn from? Early in my career, I hated going and job shadowing other departments and sitting in customer service and listening to them answer the phone all day when I couldn't even hear what the other person was saying. I could only hear, like, technology back then wasn't, I didn't have a headset, right? So
Right.
that was miserable. I'll go stand on a production line and watch them build tables or whatever all day long. I hated it in the moment. And I was a pain in the butt, didn't want to go out there. I was so resistant, but I learned so much. And I can remember people telling me that. Like, I was given that feedback and I'd be like, I don't know how this is going to help me. But by seeing the business, by understanding like simple things, like just watching that production line, I was able to see things about like how breaks didn't work, how we were doing lunch breaks was not working, of how the line was operating. I would have never figured out that our break policy was an issue if I didn't go see it with my eyes. And I wasn't looking for that. It's just those things that you pick up and notice. So get out of your cubicle and go learn the business.
And I know what people are going to say at this moment. I am so busy. I can barely get my work done as is. I can barely breathe. I'm burned out, but I'm not going to say that out loud because we've just established that.
Yeah.
So how does an employee that wants to grow, they want to develop, but how do they make this a priority with everything else that's on their desk?
Yep. They got to set boundaries, right? What is realistic that they can do in those jobs? I often talk about this, from that HR seat. When we go to create a new job and we're writing a job description, how do we know that's 40 hours of work? Unless you're on a production line or somewhere where it's very measurable of we're taking this many calls or we're building this many tables a day, like it's really hard to figure out what is the capacity of a role. And you need to be open and communicating that with your managers. And some of them might say tough, right? Like we've heard that, like, well, you need to figure it out. And so it's continuing to bring it up, doing your best to get what you can get out, find efficiencies. I worked myself out of a job constantly to get promoted.
And some of this is mindset too. It's the mindset of thinking like a CEO in your own work that you're doing every day as well.
Yeah. I can't be a good IT business analyst if I don't understand the whole flow of this business. So I'm going to spend an hour every other week in another department. And you schedule them out and you stay committed to it. You say, this is my development and I'm going to invest in myself because nobody else is.
I think that's awesome advice. I think, though, that a lot of the learning, when it's not advocated by yourself, like when it's saying, HR is saying, take this learning, take this training, whatever it is, it doesn't stick. It just doesn't. And when you go out and advocate for yourself or you go out and create the learning for yourself, it's going to stick. So how do you make the learning stick when you're forced into the learning that maybe isn't something that's completely relevant to what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So I think it's about understanding what is that career goal. I love games, and how can you make your career path a game and make goals? One of my goals when me and one of my girlfriends, we were both going into HR, we wanted to make $100,000 by the time we were 30 years old. And based on my age, like that was a very, that was a high bar to hit.
Yeah.
And that was like, I had a time, like it looked like a progression bar and it was like $100,000 and I was like working my way towards it. And it's like, what are the things I'm doing to make this happen? So I think if you can really paint that picture of why am I doing these things and where is it trying to get me to uh, to re- to take time to reflect on it. If I just sat and I watched customer service for an hour and they were answering phones, how can that make me better in my department? How can I learn how to bring their phone skills into HR and have better interviews? How can I bring those phone skills into IT and have, better help desk calls? How can we learn from each other? And you start, I love, again, games and puzzles. So how do I steal that strategy or that approach and bring it into my department and help me grow my department and make me look really good and successful because I'm bringing these things?
I love the gamify approach. I know you mentioned that you do gamify a lot of the learning. And I can say personally, I once received this feedback that totally enraged me. The feedback was that I was too concluding in my opinions, which to a coach is quite insulting, right? Because we are not supposed to have opinions, right? But after my disbelief, I was like, all right, if 2% of this is true, which is my rule, I always tell people after you're horrified or whatever it is, if 2% of it is true, what would you do? So I decided I would gamify it, and it was amazing because what I did was I played a game with myself that for 1 month, I was only going to ask questions and not have any opinion on anything. So I didn't realize, I don't think at the time that I gamified it, but I kind of did, right? And I sat there for a month asking people, have we ever tried? And then maybe I'd give my thoughts of what I'm asking about. Have we tried? Or what part of the system fell apart? Or, and when it was a game, it was fun because I would see, could I do it? Could I do it for a full month of only asking questions? And it worked. It absolutely worked. And so I guess let me back up. When I was doing that, I felt lit up. Like I felt really excited. So what is the brain doing when you're playing, when you're learning how to play?
Yeah. So it's actually releasing dopamine. So every time you score a point, every time you see progression, even every time you're frustrated and you can't get to that next level, right? And we're like trying to figure it out in a game. And we're getting frustrated. That's all releasing dopamine. And then the cortisol in our brain is what's helping us figure out what are we going to keep in the brain and what are we going to delete and put into our junk email, right? And it's making those decisions based off of emotions. If the brain doesn't detect that you had an emotion to what was just presented to you, it's just going to filter it out into the junk email. If you have a reaction to it, you got excited, you got scared, you got sad, you got frustrated, it's going to create a little groove in that brain and it's going to create a memory.
It's super interesting. So I think some adults might say, hey, we're all adults here. Why do we need to play a game? Just train me on what you need to train me on, right? Because it's a workplace. Why do we need to make it a game?
I train you on. Then do what I train you to do then.
Right, exactly. And it's not sticking, right? It's not sticking. So the game actually works. And I think the dopamine is really important, especially for neurodivergent employees, right? It has to be interesting. If it's not interesting, it's never going to stick. It just won't. And they won't be able to pay attention. So, and there are more and more neurodivergent employees in the workplace. So gamifying it appeals to those who aren't neurodivergent, appeals to those who are. It really helps it not just stick, but become relevant, I guess work. Go ahead.
You have to experience it, right? And that's why business simulation training games are so impactful. So we're doing, one example is like the bank heist recruiting game, where you have to recruit a team to go rob a bank.
Okay? Oh my gosh, right? That's scary. Okay.
So we're taking the blinders off of my biases of I've been hiring for a long time. This is how I do it. Because we're just playing a game. It reduces my personal risk in it because I'm just trying to hire the best getaway driver I can find. Right. And then we go through the phases of an interview of first starting with the persona. What do I need in a getaway driver? We start talking about that. Well, I need, when they hear sirens, they can't leave me in the bank. Okay, what interview questions are we going to ask? And when we put our lives on the line, we could go to jail for the rest of our lives if I don't hire the right getaway driver. it's a much more intense decision, right? And so
It is.
and then there's cards that are played throughout it where, hey, we just lost this candidate because of our Glassdoor reviews. Or on the interviewing side, we have to cancel the interview because you're short-staffed and you're outworking the line. And then we lose that candidate to somebody else. So they experience that pain versus me just preaching to you, hey, it's important that we get back to candidates within 3 days, or it is proven that they move on and they, like if I tell you that, you're like, okay, I'll try to do that. But if you experience it and be like, I totally lost the best getaway driver that was on the market, then it's like, okay, I see why they keep telling me to respond quickly to candidates.
That already resonates with me so much better than respond within 3 days and make sure you follow up and don't ghost them. And I love that. Is there a specific game that you wish every company would play to improve this type of thought process or this type of work?
Yeah, gosh, if I only could pick one, it would have to be something in communication, right? Because we were talking earlier how important communication is. So I actually worked with a organizational psychologist who his whole career has actually been in family psychology. And we created this game called Say What? And it's a conflict game where we originally designed it for parents and teenagers for him to use in his therapy sessions of, okay, when the teenager says this, how do I respond as a parent? So it's a conflict game. So whenever there's a conflict, there's 4 things that can happen. The person can make a declaration. Oh, I didn't know it was due on Friday. They could ask you a question. They could criticize you, or they could make a command. So the first part of the game is we'll put different statements out and they're just trying to identify what just happened. Oh, that was a declaration. Oh, that was a question. And then the next round is now, what are the different responses? What are the right ways to respond based off, is it a declaration, a question? And so it's a conflict game that, again, versus being like, well, I would say this, it's like, no, you just have to play the right card. And sometimes you don't have the right card to play. So they play the wrong card and we see how that conversation spirals out, right? So if I said one company that would have, or one game that would have the biggest impact on every single employer for every single employee, it would be the conflict game.
I would say that too. I mean, conflict and communication, which leads to conflict, right? Because communication is the foundation of everything. It's the foundation of everything. And every conflict I've ever seen has been either a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, a misapprehension, somebody who misinterpreted something that somebody else said or applied emotional reasoning to it where they believed it was one thing and it's really something else. I mean, every single conflict, every single one.
Yep.
So if you could just help people understand how to communicate and how to, when they're triggered by something, might even not even have anything to do with work. You're triggered by something from your childhood or whatever, that you can understand how to take that step back and then ask that question that will help you get to clarity. There would be so much less emotional reasoning and so much less, employees that are just frustrated and irritated and everything that's, that they feel in that moment.
In conflict, we customize this game regardless of to whatever the audience is. So sometimes it might be customer service to a customer. What are customer complaints? Or it could be manager to employee or employee to employee. So conflict is conflict no matter what. And sometimes it's just conversation, but it's like, how do I respond? It doesn't have to be hateful or mean or bad or anything like that, but how do I keep it from escalating into something, making sure we're all aligned and on the same page?
Can you share a story maybe of a team or a company that gamified like a real challenge and how they changed behavior, not just, rose their engagement scores or made people feel better?
Yeah. So one of the clients I just finished working up with, it's an engineering firm. They've been around for quite a while. Pretty new leadership team. And like most leaders, never developed. Their companies didn't develop them. They didn't put them through leadership courses before they got into these executive roles. And they didn't invest in themselves. They were waiting for somebody else to do it. And I always love that book, like what got you here won't get you there, right? And so like we
Absolutely.
promote really good doers that aren't leaders. And like we had to start with the foundation of compliance
Wow.
before we could even get into conflict. One of the examples that the HR manager had brought to me before we started designing the game was she had somebody come to her and say, "Hey, I want to terminate an employee." She had a whole folder of grievances that she never shared with the employee, never shared with HR, and didn't know why they couldn't do it right then. Or and then they had another example where FMLA was a mess. The supervisor's not reporting the right hours, and not even knowing with some of these compliance, like you can personally be held liable as a manager,
Absolutely.
not just the company. And they just don't know. They just don't know. Or like one of
Yeah.
them had FMLA in the performance review. They've been a manager
Wow.
for 16 years.
Wow. So
So,
so what was this game? What'd you create?
yep. So we did an escape room type like game, and we based it as they were an executive team of a cruise ship. And our cruise ship is known for tribute bands. And there were different pieces of evidence in the bags that we hid around the room with clues. And so the first thing we came out with was a letter from the EEOC saying, "We have just received a claim against us for retaliation because we had our head chef fire somebody the day after they put in a safety concern. And they're saying that we termed them due to putting in that complaint."
Right. So retaliation. Got it.
Retaliation, right? So then they have to go through the escape room and find the training records. They got to find the handbook sign off. They got to find the policy. They got to find all the handouts. These random emails that get sent to HR where you're like, don't put that in writing, right? And they're putting it up like we do it, like you would see on TV. Like they're putting everything in order on a wall and looking for the gaps. And then it's like, okay, how are we going to respond to this? Can we win it or not? And a lot of times, HR, we do all these investigations and we don't talk about it, right? Like we keep it
No.
quiet and confidential. It's like an escape room. We're digging all over the flipping place for all of this documentation that we can't find.
Right.
But it gives them that empathy and understanding. Why is HR asking you to document stuff? Like there is a reason. It's not that we just love all this paperwork. So when you get to experience it and show like, my email that I sent that I thought was just between me and Joe that said, hey, I'm going to get rid of this guy because he keeps complaining about safety. Well, it just got us in trouble.
That is an awesome game because you sitting there and lecturing people to take notes or to give feedback, give real feedback, to develop the employee. None of that is going to resonate. But if I'm running around a room on a hunt, basically, and then I'm like an investigator putting stuff on the wall like it's a crime scene,
Yep.
like that's going to engage with me of, oh, I get it now. Like, oh, now I know why I need to document or why I need to develop this employee and show best behavior and development before, realizing that they don't have the capability to do the job or something like that.
Yep.
Amazing. So you do this for companies now, and you help leaders see not just compliance, but also communication, conflict. What are some of the other areas that you do this in?
Yeah. So we have a list of different games that we offer like off of the shelf. But a lot of times what people are doing is they're bringing us their training decks, their training PowerPoints, and we're converting it into a game for them. So we did a baby formula company. Pest control and contamination cleanup is super important for somebody in the food industry, right? But it's really dry content, like pest control.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, anything compliance is dry content. Even what we were just
right?
talking about would have been really dry content.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
So that's an example. We've done financial training where we take their P&L and we build a simulation so I can understand how my decisions impact the P&L. We've done tons of safety training, fiduciary training. That's a nice boring one that us in HR need to have for our 401ks and if we have pensions and all of that fun, HIPAA. So there's all kinds. It doesn't have to be that true HR compliance, safety training, it can get
Right.
out into the other areas, communications, leadership. Um, if it's training you need to teach people, we can turn it into a game.
I wish companies would do this more often internally because I think employees would feel like they were learning, they were being developed.
Right.
And unfortunately, like we said at the beginning, you cannot rely on your company to develop you. You have to decide. And if you don't even know where to develop, that's where you hire a coach because they'll say, do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know, right? Help you figure out where you need to develop because you may not even know yet where
Yeah.
you need to develop.
One of the things I always say is that I got my MBA too soon because I didn't understand business well enough. But as I reflect back again, what it did force me to do is get out into the business and learn it because our assignments, we had to write about our current company. So if I had an assignment about purchasing and supply chain, I had to go talk to our purchasing manager and supply chain manager to be able to do my homework. So that helped guide me a little bit too. I never thought about it that way, but that was, more education.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've covered a lot. We've covered how employees need to develop themselves, how to think about themselves as CEOs. We've covered how companies and leaders can gamify learning, right? And help their employees learn things maybe that are either boring or even not boring, even just basic communication skills and basic conflict. But before I let you go, I'm going to throw a lightning round at you. I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions and have you answer in quick form. Ready?
Okay.
All right, here we go.
We'll see how I do.
What's one thing you've learned in the workplace that has always stuck with you?
That change is hard no matter what it is, period. It can be as simple as giving out cookies to your employees, and some people are mad that you spent the money. And so communication and openness is the key.
Okay. What's one thing leaders can do to encourage their employees to seek learning opportunities for themselves?
Be honest with them. If you don't have money in your training budget and you see potential in them, even if you don't see potential in them, just be transparent. I want to see you grow. I want to see you develop, but the company's not in the place to be able to do that right now. And if I could give you a piece of advice, it would be do some of these things on your own. Don't wait for the company to own your development. You own your development.
And what's one practical insight that people can apply tomorrow to learn or lead better?
Think about how you can make things memorable. How can I, whether I'm getting ready to have a conversation, I'm getting ready to do a training, how can I spark an emotion in that person to actually create a memory and make it impactful for them? So I think every manager could benefit from storytelling training, improv training. We don't do those types of things enough, but learn how to become a storyteller.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. This has been amazing, Casey. Great conversation. Where can listeners explore your games or resources or talk to you about how to advance their learning firsthand? Because I feel like this is the next wave of learning inside of companies. Or just talk to you about what they should do to explore their own learning.
Yeah. So for sure, follow me on LinkedIn. It's Casey Webster, and I put content every day out about how to act and think like a CEO, both strategy and financial. And you'll also see on there a new community that we just started called 10X Talent, and that's where we are bringing together HR leaders that want to learn how to be more strategic and how to gamify and really change the HR industry. And then the company's called My HR Extension. You can search us up on Google and check out all the games on the website, or feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or shoot me an email at casey@myhrextension.com, and love to chat with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Casey. Casey, this has been so just so informative for employees, so informative for leaders, so informative for HR. I hope we can see change. And I hope that we can see people starting to really own their own development and decide where they want to grow and have really fruitful and long careers. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What I love about this conversation is how empowering it is, mainly because it makes it clear that control is where it belongs. with you. You don't need a new title to start thinking differently, and you definitely don't need your company to hand you a development plan to start growing. Thinking like a CEO of your career means stepping back and asking valuable questions about how you show up day to day. And for leaders and HR professionals listening, this is also a call to rethink how you develop people. If today's episode gave you a new way to think about your career, share it with someone who might need that same shift. And as always, stay curious, stay growing, and stay unscripted. The journey is yours. Work Unscripted is produced and edited in partnership with the team at Palm Tree Podco and 21 Digby. The content for this week's episode was created by me, Marlo Lyons.